My family always thought I was a spineless loser, quietly taking their insults at every dinner. They had no idea that behind my cheap clothes and thick glasses, I was their worst nightmare. When the highest level distress text from my grandmother flashed on my screen, our game officially ended. They thought they were hunting weak prey, completely unaware the cage door had just slammed shut, and I was the one holding the keys. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now let's begin the story. My name is Adeline Lawson, and I am 32 years old. If you asked anyone in my extended family, they would eagerly tell you that I am a massive disappointment. When they look at me, they see a frumpy, socially awkward woman who barely scrapes by working a pathetic part-time IT help desk job. They see a glorified cable fixer they can order around and belittle at every holiday gathering. That is exactly what I want them to see. It is a carefully constructed, flawless illusion. In reality, I am a senior cybersecurity risk analyst for Aegis Vanguard Analytics, one of the most notoriously ruthless and secretive private data intelligence organizations on the planet. While my family thinks I am struggling to reset passwords for clueless office workers, I'm actually hunting down corporate spies, dismantling financial syndicates, and erasing digital footprints for high-profile clients. My Uncle Marcus and his wife, my Aunt Vivian, absolutely loathe me. Or rather, they pity me in that toxic, self-serving way that makes them feel powerful. For years, they have used my supposed incompetence to elevate their own status. I am the one they summon to fix their network router at family dinners, tossing me scraps of condescension while they flaunt their wealth. But their disdain for me is not just cruel, it is highly tactical. Their primary target has always been my grandmother Beatrice. For as long as I can remember, Marcus and Vivian have been systematically brainwashing her, poisoning her mind with lies about my failures. They constantly reinforce the narrative that I am unstable, broke, and entirely incapable of taking care of myself, let alone her. Their goal is painfully simple. They want to sever any hope she might have of relying on me, isolating her completely so they can maintain total control over her life. I let them play their little games because I knew the truth, and so did she. But late one night, the game violently changed. I was sitting in the dark when my phone vibrated. It was a text message from Grandma Beatrice's number. It read, "Have the fantails flown south yet?" A sharp chill instantly radiated down my spine, suffocating the air in the room. To anyone else, it was a meaningless question about birds. To me, it was a blaring siren. It was a level 1 distress code. 10 years ago, long before her health supposedly started failing, my grandmother and I established that exact phrase. We swore to each other that it would only ever be used under one specific, terrifying condition. It meant she had been stripped of her freedom, she was trapped, and her life was in direct, immediate danger. The docile, clumsy IT girl vanished in a fraction of a second. I stood up, locked my bedroom door, and walked into my closet. Pushing past a row of cheap, oversized clothes, I pressed my thumb against a hidden biometric scanner. The back wall slid open with a soft hiss, revealing my real workspace. The basement was a chilling, temperature-controlled server room, bathed in the harsh blue glow of a multi-screen computer system. I sat at the console and immediately went to work. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I activated my tracing protocols, desperately needing to ping her device without alerting whoever was holding her captive. Within 45 seconds, I bypassed 3 layers of commercial encryption and locked onto her exact GPS coordinates. The signal was not coming from her cozy suburban home. It was pinging from an isolated, brutalist-style villa sitting alone in the middle of the barren, unforgiving desert in Sedona, Arizona. This was the remote estate Uncle Marcus had just forced her to move into 2 weeks ago, claiming she needed a quiet place for her retirement and recuperation. Recuperation was a lie. It was a fortress. And now it was a prison. I did not bother packing a bag. I grabbed my heavily encrypted tactical laptop, a handful of untraceable stealth drives, and my car keys. I marched out into the freezing night air and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway and pointed my car toward the endless black highway, a cold, calculated rage settled over me. Marcus and Vivian thought they had cleanly disposed of a helpless old woman. They forgot that she had a monster waiting in the shadows. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, tearing through the night, bringing the absolute worst of my world straight to their front door. The harsh Arizona sun was just beginning to bleed over the jagged red rocks of Sedona when I pulled into the expansive circular driveway. The villa loomed ahead, a massive structure of glass and concrete that felt entirely alien against the barren desert landscape. I cut the engine and took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to slump. I messed up my hair, adjusted the thick smudged glasses on my nose, and let a trembling, anxious energy take over my body. The elite cybersecurity operative vanished, replaced instantly by the pathetic, easily overwhelmed niece they all expected. I hurried up the meticulously landscaped path and knocked frantically on the heavy oak door. It swung open to reveal Aunt Vivian. She was perfectly manicured, draped in a silk robe, but her face immediately contorted into a mask of exaggerated theatrical distress. She planted herself firmly in the doorway, her arm blocking the threshold. "Adeline, what on earth are you doing here at this hour?" she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest, as if my presence was a physical shock. "We told you we would call if there were any updates. Your grandmother is resting, and the last thing she needs is you barging in and causing a scene." While she spoke, my eyes darted past her, systematically mapping the entryway. I was not looking at the imported Italian marble or the expensive modern art hanging on the walls. I was reading the environment like a source code. To the right of the heavy door frame, a sleek biometric keypad pulsed with a faint green light, requiring a fingerprint just to access the foyer. Above us, nestled discreetly in the corner of the ceiling, an ultra-wide-angle, high-definition security camera with infrared capabilities slowly tracked my movements. Through the long, echoing hallway, an advanced digital thermostat glowed on the wall, hardwired into a central remote-controlled smart grid. My stomach turned to absolute ice. This was not a luxury retirement retreat. It was a state-of-the-art closed-loop digital panopticon. Every door, every breath, every degree of temperature was being rigorously monitored and controlled by whoever held the master application. Before I could formulate a stuttering, pathetic reply to Vivian, a sneering voice echoed from the sweeping glass staircase. "Well, if it isn't the family's resident tech support girl," Logan drawled. My cousin descended the stairs slowly, looking like he had just stepped off a luxury yacht. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive, finely woven cashmere sweater and a limited edition titanium watch that likely cost more than my supposed annual salary. He stopped next to his mother, looking me up and down with utter revulsion. His cold eyes lingered on my wrinkled, oversized cardigan and scuffed sneakers. "Seriously? Adeline, did you sleep in your rusty car? You look like a complete miserable mess." Logan laughed, a sharp grating sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "You really should not have bothered driving all the way out here. Dad and I have everything handled. Our new lifestyle demands a certain level of security and sophistication, things you clearly do not understand and never will. We are operating on a completely different elevated level now. Go back home to your little basement apartment. You are just tracking cheap desert dirt into a multi-million-dollar estate." I forced my eyes to well up with fake desperate tears, letting my hands shake uncontrollably as I clutched my cheap canvas tote bag against my chest. "I just wanted to see her," I stammered, making my voice crack perfectly with feigned anxiety. "I was so worried. Please, I brought my own water. I just need to sit down for exactly 1 minute. The drive was so incredibly long and dark." I stepped forward, clumsily, deliberately pushing past Vivian's outstretched arm before she could react. I was holding a flimsy plastic cup of water I had brought from the car. As I stumbled onto the pristine, hand-woven Persian rug in the center of the grand living room, I intentionally twisted my ankle and tripped over my own feet. The plastic cup slipped from my frantic grasp. Water splashed aggressively across the priceless silk fibers of the rug. "Are you completely insane?" Vivian shrieked, dropping her elegant, restrained facade instantly. She dropped to her knees, frantically dabbing at the growing wet spot with her silk sleeves. "You clumsy, worthless idiot!" Logan yelled, rushing over to furiously pull the edges of the rug up off the hardwood floor. "Do you have any idea how much this single piece of fabric costs? It is worth more than your life." I began apologizing profusely, crying loudly and waving my hands in a blind panic, but my internal clock was already ticking down. 1, 2, 3. I had exactly 30 seconds of total unadulterated distraction. While they were furiously focused on the ruined floor, screaming at each other about water stains, I slipped backward, dissolving smoothly into the shadows of the massive custom-built entertainment center. My eyes locked onto the glowing hub behind the 80-inch flat-screen television. It was the central routing terminal for the entire smart home network, the brain of their digital prison. I slid a sleek, matte black stealth USB drive from the secret seam in my sleeve. In one fluid, utterly silent motion, I reached behind the console and shoved the drive straight into the primary network port. No warning lights flashed. No security alarms sounded. The ghost malware deployed instantly, quietly slithering into the network's core architecture, severing their administrative control, and silently rerouting all data access directly to my hidden servers back home. The keys to the digital cage were now entirely mine. I pulled my hand back into my sleeve just as Logan snapped his head up to glare at me. But in that crucial split second, my gaze shifted past his angry face toward the darkened corner of the massive room. Grandma Beatrice was sitting huddled in a massive, overwhelming leather armchair. To Vivian and Logan, she looked like a fragile, rapidly deteriorating old woman. Her thin shoulders were slumped, her frail hands rested weakly in her lap, and her body was trembling slightly. But as my eyes met hers, the trembling stopped for a fraction of a second. Beneath the wrinkled, exhausted exterior, her eyes were completely lucid, razor-sharp, and burning with a fierce, quiet intensity. I gave her an almost imperceptible nod. A microscopic smirk touched the corner of her pale mouth before she instantly resumed her frail, vacant stare. The system was breached. The counterattack had officially begun. Back in the highly secure subterranean operations floor at Aegis Vanguard Analytics, the true scope of the infiltration began. I sat in my designated isolation pod, bathed in the sharp, sterile glow of 6 curved monitors. The environment was completely silent, a stark contrast to the chaotic, emotionally exhausting theater I had just performed at the villa. I cracked open the encrypted data packet I had successfully siphoned from their central router. I expected to find evidence of financial manipulation, perhaps forged checks or drained savings accounts. What I found was infinitely more sinister. It was not a simple heist. It was a meticulously calculated psychological execution. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard as I correlated the smart home environmental logs with the interior surveillance footage. My Uncle Marcus was not merely waiting for my grandmother to pass away. He was actively and maliciously driving her insane. I watched a playback of a video feed from 3 days ago. At exactly 2 a.m, Marcus used his remote administrative privileges to plunge the temperature in her bedroom to a freezing 40 degrees. Simultaneously, he routed low-frequency, distorted audio files through the hidden ceiling speakers. The audio logs revealed files labeled as footsteps, scratching noises, and faint whispers. When Beatrice inevitably woke up shivering and terrified, grasping at her chest, she stumbled toward her automated electronic medicine cabinet to take her heart medication. But the system logs showed that Vivian had remotely engaged the locking mechanism, forcing Beatrice into a state of blind panic while her heart pounded irregularly. They were meticulously manufacturing a digital paper trail of severe dementia, paranoia, and physical incompetence. The endgame was medical and legal tyranny. Marcus needed a judge to declare Beatrice entirely mentally incompetent. If he could secure legal guardianship, he would gain absolute, unquestioned control over her entire estate. But he did not care about her retirement funds or the property itself. He was after the crown jewel of our family. My late grandfather was a brilliant chemical engineer. Decades ago, he patented a revolutionary high-tech water filtration core designed for massive industrial purification, capable of eradicating microplastics and heavy metals at an unprecedented scale. That single piece of intellectual property was valued at tens of millions of dollars. Marcus wanted to steal it, license it to international conglomerates, and live like a king on the endless royalties. But as I dug deeper, running a localized penetration test on the individual devices connected to their network, I uncovered a massive twist. I hit a heavily encrypted hidden partition on Logan's personal laptop. My cousin was a greedy, arrogant parasite, and more importantly, he was deeply impatient. Logan was not willing to wait for the slow, bureaucratic wheels of the legal system to declare his grandmother insane. He wanted his massive payout immediately. I bypassed his flimsy, commercially available firewall in less than 4 minutes and accessed his Tor browser history. Logan was actively shopping the stolen patent schematics on the dark web. He was communicating with a notorious corporate espionage syndicate, trying to fence the proprietary blueprints to a rival international conglomerate for a fraction of its true worth just to get quick cash. I could have packaged the network logs, downloaded the surveillance videos, and called the federal authorities right then. But getting them arrested for attempted theft was too clean. It was too easy, and it would not punish them for the torture they had inflicted on my grandmother. They needed to be utterly dismantled from the inside out. Instead of calling the police, I decided to play their game better than they ever could. I spun up an untraceable server node routed through Eastern Europe and constructed a flawless, terrifying digital alias. I became a high-roller black market technology broker known only in the deepest encrypted forums. I sent Logan a heavily encrypted direct message bypassing his current low-level buyers entirely. I offered him an upfront sum of $5 million in untraceable cryptocurrency for the exclusive immediate rights to the filtration patent. The greed in his response was almost palpable through the screen. He took the bait in under 10 minutes, enthusiastically agreeing to my terms, completely blind to the fact that he was negotiating his own total destruction with the very cousin he had just mocked. With Logan firmly hooked on the line, it was time to close the jaws of the trap. I wrote a custom routing script and injected it deep into the villa's mainframe. I established myself as the absolute invisible gatekeeper of their reality. I isolated their entire communications network from the outside world. I hijacked their domain name servers and spoofed their cellular towers. From that exact second forward, every outgoing phone call, every text message, every single search engine query routed directly through my servers before reaching the actual internet. If they called for help, they would get me. If they checked their bank balances, they would see only the numbers I allowed them to see. The state-of-the-art digital panopticon they had built to torture and monitor my grandmother was now a sealed quarantine zone. They were trapped inside a web of their own making, and I held every single thread. The retaliation began exactly at midnight. I sat in my glowing isolation pod, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, ready to orchestrate a symphony of pure, unadulterated psychological terror. My Uncle Marcus loved his temperature controls. He loved the power of making my grandmother freeze. So I decided he needed to experience a taste of his own medicine. I accessed the primary climate zone for the master suite. With a few deliberate keystrokes, I overrode the safety limiters and plummeted the ambient temperature of his bedroom down to a bone-chilling 32 degrees Fahrenheit. The vents blasted freezing air directly over his expensive memory foam mattress. A few minutes later, the biometric sensors indicated Marcus was shifting violently in his sleep, his heart rate spiking as the freezing air bit into his skin. Before he could fully wake up and adjust the thermostat, I triggered the next phase. I flooded his personalized security dashboard with phantom alerts. His smartphone sitting on the nightstand began screaming with a high-pitched alarm. The screen flashed bright red, displaying a terrifying notification: perimeter breach detected in Sector 4. Multiple unidentified heat signatures approaching the eastern terrace. I watched through the infrared ceiling cameras as Marcus jolted upright, his breath visibly forming white clouds in the freezing bedroom. He frantically grabbed a heavy bronze statue from his dresser and sprinted down the hallway in his silk pajamas, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. He spent 45 agonizing minutes patrolling the empty pitch-black grounds, jumping at every shadow, finding absolutely nothing. By 3 o'clock in the morning, Marcus and Vivian were huddled in their bed, exhausted, freezing, and deeply on edge. That was when I deployed the auditory payload. Over the past 24 hours, I had silently recorded all of their private conversations through the microphones embedded in their smart televisions and voice assistants. I isolated a specific damning exchange they had in the kitchen the day prior. I fed the audio file into the villa's surround sound ceiling speakers, dropping the volume to a barely audible ghostly whisper. "We just need to increase the dosage," Vivian's recorded voice hissed from the dark corners of the ceiling. "If she cannot hold a pen to sign the proxy, this entire plan falls apart, Marcus. Do not be weak." "I am handling it," Marcus's voice echoed back, chillingly detached. "The doctor is paid. We just need her to look crazy for one more week." In the master bedroom, Vivian sat up, her eyes wide with sheer terror. "Did you just say something?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus scrambled to turn on the bedside lamp. "I did not say a word. That was your voice." I slowly increased the volume by 15%. The audio looped, growing louder and more distinct. The color completely drained from Vivian's face. She turned on her husband, her voice shrill and hysterical. "Are you recording me? Are you building a blackmail file in case the authorities get involved, you treacherous coward?" "I am not recording anything," Marcus roared back, his paranoia instantly flaring. "You are the one who hired those cheap security contractors. You probably installed hidden microphones to use against me in a divorce." Within seconds, the two of them were screaming at each other, their alliance fracturing under the weight of their own guilty consciences. They were tearing each other apart, completely unaware that the real architect of their misery was sitting hundreds of miles away, grinning at the audio feed. While the parents were spiraling into madness, the son was busy digging his own financial grave. On my secondary monitor, the dark web routing logs lit up green. Logan was online using his encrypted browser to finalize our transaction. I, playing the role of the shadowy technology broker, sent him a secure message containing a digital escrow contract. I told him he needed to download and authorize the file to release the $5 million into his anonymous crypto wallet. Logan was so blinded by greed that he did not even bother to run a rudimentary sandbox scan on the file. I watched the keystroke logger capture his password as he eagerly clicked execute. The file was not a contract. It was a military-grade, self-replicating ransomware worm. The moment the executable launched, it bypassed his local network entirely and injected itself directly into his personal financial cloud. I did not just lock his computer. I locked his entire life. The worm scrambled the encryption keys to every single offshore bank account, every domestic checking account, and every high-limit credit card tied to his social security number. His screen flashed black, then displayed a single glowing red padlock icon with a balance of $0. Logan leaped out of his chair, furiously punching his keyboard, but he was entirely locked out of his own wealth. He was instantly, irrevocably bankrupt. Downstairs, the chaos had reached a boiling point. Marcus, desperate and severely sleep-deprived, grabbed his phone to call the one person who could expedite his evil plan. He dialed the private number of the corrupt psychiatrist he had bribed heavily to falsify my grandmother's medical evaluation. The moment Marcus pressed send, my network gatekeeper protocol intercepted the cellular transmission. The call never left the house. It routed directly to my headset. I engaged a sophisticated real-time artificial intelligence voice cloning software that I had trained using audio clips of the doctor from public medical seminars. When I spoke into my microphone, the software perfectly replicated the doctor's deep, authoritative baritone. "Marcus," I answered, keeping the synthetic voice remarkably calm. "It is incredibly late. Why are you calling me?" "The house is going crazy," Marcus panted. pacing the length of his living room. The security system is malfunctioning, Vivian is losing her mind, and Beatrice is acting strange. We cannot wait any longer. I need you to come out here and finalize the incompetency paperwork. Now, before everything falls apart. Calm down, I commanded through the voice modulator. Panicking will only draw suspicion. I will move the evaluation up. I will be at the estate this weekend. Just ensure the proxy documents are drafted and ready for my signature. Do not call me on this line again. I terminated the connection, leaving Marcus staring at his phone, believing he had just secured his victory. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long, satisfied breath. The entire family was descending into a state of total panic, surrounded by technology that was actively hunting them. Yet their towering arrogance served as my greatest shield. Despite the freezing rooms, the phantom intruders, the echoing voices, and the sudden financial lockouts, it never once crossed their minds that they were under a targeted cyber attack. They simply cursed the smart home manufacturers, blaming the chaos on a catastrophic software glitch. They thought they were the smartest people in the room, completely oblivious to the fact that the spider had already finished spinning her web, and they were firmly stuck in the center. The weekend arrived with a suffocating, blistering heat, but inside the Sedona villa, the atmosphere was completely frozen in tension. I was parked half a mile down the desert road, sitting in the driver's seat of my car, watching the live high-definition surveillance feed on my encrypted tactical tablet. The corrupt psychiatrist had just pulled his luxury sedan into the circular driveway. The final stage of their despicable theater was officially underway. Inside the grand living room, my grandmother was backed into the furthest corner of the massive leather sofa. Vivian stood over her left shoulder like a predatory bird, while Marcus paced aggressively in front of the glass coffee table. The doctor sat opposite them, pulling a thick stack of legal documents from his expensive leather briefcase. It was the medical power of attorney, the exact document required to strip Beatrice of her basic human rights and hand her entire incredibly valuable estate directly over to Marcus. "It is a simple signature, Mother," Marcus said, his voice dripping with venomous impatience. "The doctor is a very busy man with a strict schedule. Stop making this so incredibly difficult. You know your mind is slipping. We are doing this for your own good, whether you understand it or not." Beatrice's hands shook as Vivian forcefully thrust a heavy gold fountain pen into her fragile fingers. The doctor leaned forward, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the dotted line at the absolute bottom of the last page. "Just sign right here on the line, Beatrice," the doctor cooed in a sickeningly sweet, condescending tone. "It will take 2 seconds of your time, and then you can go straight back to resting." My grandmother slowly lowered the pen. The gold nib hovered exactly 1 inch above the thick parchment paper. My thumb hovered directly over the red execution command on my tablet screen. 1/2 an inch, 1/4 of an inch. I pressed down. Every single motorized heavy-duty blackout blind in the sprawling villa slammed shut simultaneously, with the deafening violent sound of a steel vault locking. The brilliant midday desert sun was instantly obliterated, plunging the entire living room into absolute darkness. Vivian let out a piercing, terrified shriek. Marcus shouted in blind confusion, frantically tapping the screen of his smartwatch to override the system, completely unaware that his administrative access had been permanently revoked days ago. Before they could even take a single breath, the massive 80-inch television screen mounted on the marble wall exploded into blinding white light. A deep, resonant bass tone rattled the glass windows as a high-definition logo slowly rotated on the screen, a silver shield embedded with a glowing digital eye. Beneath it, bold black letters spelled out, "Aegis Vanguard Analytics." The corporate logo dissolved instantly, replaced by a rapid-fire cascade of digital ledgers. It was Logan's entire, supposedly untraceable dark web transaction history. Every single encrypted chat log, every illegal negotiation for the water filtration patent, and the final catastrophic digital contract that had completely wiped out his personal finances, scrolled down the screen in massive glowing text. From the second-floor landing, Logan let out a guttural, horrified gasp as he recognized his own secret username plastered across the massive display. His eyes darted from the screen to the front door, finally connecting the pieces. He realized the wealthy anonymous technology broker who had just legally robbed him of every single penny he owned was not a stranger. The heavy oak front door swung open on its own, the biometric lock chiming a cheerful welcoming melody that echoed through the silent house. I stepped over the threshold, letting the heavy door click securely shut behind me. The pathetic, hunched-over IT help desk girl they loved to mock was completely dead. I stood tall, wearing a razor-sharp, custom-tailored black blazer, matching slacks, and leather stiletto heels that clicked with terrifying authority against the hardwood floor. I removed my thick, smudged glasses and dropped them into the nearest ceramic vase, staring them down with eyes as cold and unforgiving as the Arctic Sea. "What in the hell is going on here?" Marcus roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He lunged forward, his fists clenched tight, spit flying from his lips. "You crazy, delusional psycho. I knew you were completely unhinged. I'm going to have you locked up in a psychiatric ward right next to her." He charged at me, fully intending to physically assault me, but I did not even flinch. I did not take a single step backward. I simply offered him a chilling, dead-eyed smile and pressed one physical button on the side of my smartphone. The television screen behind him instantly shifted. Logan's financial ruin vanished, replaced by crisp, ultra-high-definition video footage. It was a recording from the hidden kitchen camera captured exactly 48 hours ago. The audio blasted through the surround sound speakers, echoing violently off the high ceilings. "I will just crush 2 of these heavy sedatives into her morning tea." Marcus's recorded voice boomed through the room. On the screen, the high-resolution image clearly showed him grinding a handful of prescription pills into a fine powder and dumping them into a porcelain teacup. "By the time the doctor gets here, she will not even know her own name." Marcus froze dead in his tracks, his eyes wide with absolute terror. The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like a walking corpse. Vivian collapsed against the armrest of the sofa, clutching her chest, gasping for air, as if the room had suddenly run out of oxygen. Her carefully constructed high society facade was completely shattered, but I was not finished breaking them. The right half of the television screen split open, displaying a highly confidential bank routing document. It was a direct wire transfer log from a shadowy shell corporation in the Cayman Islands directly into a domestic business account. The amounts were circled in bright, undeniable red ink. Exactly $500,000. The recipient account prominently displayed the name of the private medical practice belonging to the very psychiatrist sitting on the sofa. The doctor let out a pathetic, strangled wheeze. He looked at the massive screen, then down at the fraudulent legal document in his lap, realizing instantly that his entire medical career, his pristine reputation and his freedom, had just been incinerated in front of his own eyes. His hands began to shake so violently that he could no longer hold his leather clipboard. The heavy fountain pen rolled off his lap, and the unblemished power of attorney paperwork slipped from his trembling fingers, fluttering uselessly to the floor. I stepped forward into the exact center of the room, folding my arms across my chest, basking in the suffocating silence of their absolute destruction. "The medical evaluation is over," I said, my voice cutting through the dead air like a scalpel. "And you all failed." Marcus let out a feral, desperate roar. His eyes darted wildly around the room, landing on the heavy bronze statue he had used to patrol the house just days ago. He snatched it from the console table and hurled it directly at the massive television screen. The glass shattered outward in a spectacular explosion of sparks and black smoke. He did not stop there. He charged toward the concealed entertainment center, frantically ripping out cables and violently smashing his boots into the central routing terminal, desperately trying to destroy the physical evidence of his crimes. "You can crush the hardware into dust, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through his pathetic tantrum. "But you are about 48 hours too late." He froze his chest, heaving his boots covered in plastic shrapnel. He slowly turned his head to look at me, absolute dread sinking into his features. "I did not just record you," I explained, offering him a hollow, pitying smile. Aegis Vanguard Analytics is a fully licensed private intelligence firm with top-tier federal clearance. Every single piece of data, every video file, every audio recording, and every single keystroke Logan made on the dark web has been streaming live on a secure encrypted server directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cybercrime Division for the past 2 days. As if on cue, the absolute silence of the desert was violently ripped apart. The shrill, deafening wail of federal sirens echoed off the canyon walls, rapidly multiplying in volume. Red and blue strobe lights painted the shattered windows of the villa. Marcus fell to his knees, dropping the bronze statue. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy final thud. The heavy oak door was kicked open. A dozen tactical agents flooded into the foyer, their weapons drawn, shouting commands that paralyzed the entire family. The corrupt psychiatrist did not even hesitate. He threw himself onto the floor, interlacing his fingers behind his head and screaming at the top of his lungs. "I will testify. I have the offshore account numbers. I will give you everything on Marcus Lawson. Just give me federal immunity." Upstairs, Logan was dragged down the glass staircase in handcuffs, openly sobbing, as an agent read him his rights for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and distribution of stolen intellectual property. Marcus and Vivian were yanked to their feet and slammed against the wall. The charges were rattled off one by one: elder abuse, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit extortion. An agent coldly informed Vivian that every single one of their domestic and offshore financial assets had already been completely frozen pending federal seizure. I ignored the chaos. I walked straight past the federal agents and approached the leather armchair. I reached down and gently unlocked the bulky biometric tracking band clamped tightly around my grandmother's thin wrist. The device fell to the rug, useless. Beatrice Lawson did not need my help to stand. She pushed herself up from the chair, her spine perfectly straight. The frail, vacant shell she had been forced to wear instantly evaporated. She looked at Marcus and Vivian being shoved out the front door, her expression devoid of any sympathy. Then she turned to me. Her sharp, brilliant eyes softened, shining with a profound, overwhelming pride for the granddaughter her own family had so foolishly underestimated. 3 months later, the dry heat of Arizona was a distant memory. I was standing in the massive living room of a high-security, ultra-luxury penthouse in the heart of downtown Seattle. The rain patted gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Grandma Beatrice was sitting at a sleek mahogany dining table, sipping premium herbal tea and confidently reviewing a stack of international licensing contracts. She had completely regained legal control of her chemical engineering empire, and her mind was sharper than ever. As I looked out over the glittering city skyline, I finally understood the truth. You must never mistake silence for weakness. Toxic people will always use the excuse of blood and family to justify their greed, their manipulation, and their crimes. But when those boundaries are permanently broken, a strong, calculated, and entirely rational counterattack is the only weapon you have left to survive. Sometimes the only way to escape the cage is to prove you are the most dangerous thing inside it. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Haley Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we would love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you are listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.